everyone, welcome to a new video on the channel. Today I am discussing all about the books I read in June. So this is my June reading update. I read a total of 12 books in June, which I think is the least amount this year so far, which is absolutely fine by me. I do notice a trend though. In June last year was the least amount read as well, but I did read a little bit more this year. And difference between the 2 years is that I had a good month. So last year I didn't have really good stats for June, but this year I read a total of 5,033 pages. My average was 4.4, which I think is the highest this year so far. I read the majority of ebooks because I was reading a lot of ARCs. I DNF'd one book and I sampled two, and sampled simply means I didn't get past 10%. And I did not take part in any challenges over June because June and December are my 2 months off from the TBR vending machine game. So the other thing was my top read was One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I hope I'm saying that right. This was absolutely fantastic. I will talk about the book when we get to that portion of the book video, but this was one that I did start in May. I didn't have enough time to read and then consumed later on in June. So very excited to talk about that book, but let's get into the first book instead first. And that was Thank You Next by Catherine Freeman. This is a romance novel based around a reality dating TV show. I really used to enjoy watching like The Bachelor and The Bachelorette when I was younger, so I do sometimes pick up these romance novels based around a reality dating show because I used to enjoy watching them. And I was sent the link to this arc by the publisher, so I decided to pick it up. This follows Molly, and she had a boyfriend at the beginning of the book who dumped her so he could go on the dating show to promote his business. And I was so livid that this guy could treat her like that and gaslight her so badly in his confession as to why he was doing this. And I wanted Molly to go on the show, which is her plan to do. That's the sort of the concept. She goes on to surprise him and be like, let's still be together. But I wanted her to go on the show and find someone else and really enjoy herself. And that's what she does. She does go on the show, and the show has a little bit of a weird premise where you get partnered up right from the beginning with who they think. It's kind of like Marriage at First Sight, where you kind of the professionals pair you up based on your like preferences and personality and what they think would match you perfectly in a relationship. And so Molly doesn't get matched with her ex-partner. Instead, she gets matched with her other ex-partner that she didn't know was going to be on the show. And no one knew this, and so obviously it brings a lot of drama. The main male protagonist I found was really interesting. Ben has quite a tragic story in love, and the whole reason he broke up with Molly isn't how she portrays it. And I appreciated the author's attempt to try and bring this to the surface and make it a bit more of a side plot line. However, the author also decides to sort of sabotage Molly's character, in my opinion, and makes her focus on being really dramatic and erratic in her behaviour. I just couldn't get behind her development as a character when she was constantly back and forth between Ben, who's the main male protagonist, and Duncan, her ex-partner. And obviously there is an element to her personality and her character about rejection and abandonment, so it all plays into each other and it all makes sense. But I just found myself exasperated with Molly the longer I read it, which when I started the book I was so on her side and really wanted her to have everything she deserved, and then by the end of the book I was, you know, just somewhat satisfied, and that is the main reason why I gave this 3 stars. The second book I finished was Beneath These Cursed Stars by Lexi Ryan. This is the first book in the companion series to These Hollow Vows, and I absolutely love that series. Have recommended it to so many people, even non-readers, and they've enjoyed it. It's definitely one of my favorite reads, and I have like a huge comfort element to it because I read it at a time where life was quite difficult for me, with my mum's health, and it was all when I was very first getting back into reading as well, so it's just a really special world to me, and so I was hugely anticipating the return to Fairy through this new story. Unfortunately, even though you can see I gave this 4 stars, I have a lot of critique about this second attempt in Fairy, mostly because the author decided to do 2 main female protagonists, and so we have 2 narratives rather than just the one, both in first person. And when we spend time with Jocelyn, who is the main female protagonist's younger sister in book 1, she's now leading this book. I was absolutely not interested. Yeah, I had a really hard time reading Jocelyn's point of view, and then it would switch to Felicity and her point of view, and I really enjoyed her point of view. She really saved the book for me. I really appreciated her storyline a great deal more. There was a lot more to her character and the intrigue around her storyline, and then you would swap back to Jocelyn and it would jar you from what you're enjoying with Felicity, and vice versa. When you feel like something is a little bit happening in Jocelyn's storyline, it goes back to Felicity's. I just feel like this was not well presented. That being said, the twists at the end of this book, I forgot how good 𝓤𝓲𝓬𝓮 is at writing a story and building it up this whole time, and you're not even aware of what she's doing, and then when the revelations come, you're like, oh my god, there were all these signs. So the whole time when I was exasperated reading Jocelyn's point of view, there was actually a lot happening that I was kind of missing, and perhaps that was down to my despair because I'd overhyped this for myself and I just wasn't paying enough attention and just didn't want to read her parts. But yeah, the revelations around what happened in her storyline just left me with my mouth open. I was like, oh my god, how did I not see this? I was kind of annoyed with myself for not guessing it either. Um, and then with Felicity's storyline, where it left off, I'm really hyped up for what's going to happen next, and I'm hopeful that I don't overhype it, like I come in with a little bit of a less expectation for book 2 when that eventually gets announced. But for what this was, if I just was reading in Jocelyn's point of view, I wouldn't have enjoyed it, but I did enjoy Felicity a great deal with 𝓤𝓱𝓮. I absolutely love him. He's one of my favourite characters from the first series in this world, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next. So yeah, I gave this one 4 stars, but only just. The next book I finished was Destroy the Day by Bridget Kemmerer. This is book 3 in the Defy the Night series. It also concludes the series, and for transparency, I read book 1, absolutely loved it. It was one of my absolute favourite reads when it came out. Then book 2, I did give it 4 stars. It's a bit like the book I just talked about. I had a lot of critique about it. I was quite bored throughout it. There was a lot of storyline that I didn't enjoy, and then the ending really wrapped me up and was a complete 5-star portion of the read. And so I didn't come into Destroy the Day with huge expectations because this author has let me down in the past. I did enjoy her other series, Curse Breakers. I really enjoyed number 1. Book number 2 was just not for me, and book number 3 kind of just saved it, but not really. In this case, however, we're back to another 5-star read. I have really enjoyed Destroy the Day. I am not in the majority who found Harriston's point of view pointless. I really enjoyed his part in this story, probably more at times than with Corrick and with Tessa. I just really enjoyed having his input to this third book, and then also really enjoyed the interactions with characters that weren't in a romantic relationship. So the building of friendship between Tessa and, gosh, what is his name? I know his name's Eric, but Rocco, or is it Roscoe? So their relationship, and then her connections with Olive, who comes along, and then also with Coric and Lachlan. Like, there's a lot of platonic relationships that are built really, really well and propel the story along and teach the characters a lot about loyalty and who they can rely on at the end of the day, and just changes a lot in their current way of thinking. I really enjoyed everything about this book. I don't want to give away too much because you obviously need to have read book 1 and 2 to understand it. Definitely the curse and the sickness that sort of led book 1 and 2 it's not as prevalent in this because it's not the main plot line anymore, but it all wraps up really well. The end made me cry. I really enjoyed everything about this one, and I highly recommend picking up this series. You just have to get through that sophomore book in it, and have a bit of patience, because I really had a good time with this one. If you watched last month's reading update, you would have noticed that I read 2 books by this author. This is Rootbound by Tara DeWitt. This is a romance novel set on a ranch, and I guess you can say it's like a bit of a cowboy romance. I really enjoyed this one. I think this one will probably be my favorite aside from Funny Feelings, and I just had a really good time reading this book. I think this author is exceptionally talented at telling romance stories that are balanced, so they have a lot of personal development for the characters to go through and unpack and work on. There's the romantic connection, there's family dynamics, there's just a lot of well-placed angst and resolutions and mature responses, and it's just everything that I love in a romance novel. There's enough emotional connection between the characters that when they have their passion, it's well deserved. This one follows Tate, and her father has been out of her life for quite some time. She has nothing to do with the Logan family, and she ends up having to go to the ranch and work there as a photographer. The people who hired her to do the job didn't realize that it's her family ranch. I think she went by a different name for her photography business, and so she has to go back there and do the work. And of course, she hasn't seen anyone for a very long time. And Henry, who is the main male protagonist, he is sort of quite protective of the Logans because they saved him at a time in his life where he was not doing great. And so, of course, when Tate comes along and she's a bit of a spitfire, he reacts to her accordingly, and of course they have quite a instant, I want to say love affair, but chemistry is very high between them because they're bantering back and forth all the time, and I really enjoyed this. It actually is quite funny because I don't love insta-love at all, and I'll try to avoid that in a romance novel, and I normally never give books that have an insta-love element to it such a high rating. But when I think back on it, it was only like maybe a week into Tate's stay before they started having a physical relationship, and everything moved quite fast for them, which worked really well in this situation. I don't know how the author managed to do that, but it just felt really believable and really powerful and intense. However, there's a lot of work to be done for Tate with her family, and I really enjoyed the development there with her family, especially with her grandma and with her brother, like he's half brother, sorry, her half brother. Yeah, really good read. I highly recommend any book by this author. So far, I've read 3 of her books, and they've all been 5 stars. The next book I completed was 𝓤𝓲𝓬 by S.C. Grayson. This is the last book in the Talented series. This is a fantasy romance, a gaslamp fantasy as well. It's set in London, and there's like a underlying gang type element to the world, and the magic system is around people who are called the talented, and they have special abilities. And in this third installment of the world, we have 𝓬𝓱𝓮, who is I don't believe she has a single talent, and then you have Ansel, who is the ringmaster, or he runs the circus that is currently in town, and at the same time there are things going missing and talented people being taken from their new roles in elite families that are sponsoring them. And it is down to 𝓬𝓱𝓮, who used to be in one of the gangs, the Lions, is now on the police force, and it's down to her to try and figure out what's happening with one of the gangs called the Foxes. And this is based on Robin Hood in the retelling, and I found this one to be probably the best in the series. I really enjoyed Ansel. He's a short king, and I'm really glad the author decided to write him as such, because we don't see a lot of capable main male characters that are shorter than or at the same height as the main female protagonist. And I really enjoyed the circus elements to this, and obviously the storyline is quite predictable, especially when you know what happens with Robin Hood. And I would have actually liked to have seen a little bit more of the Robin Hood retelling put into this, but for what it was, I was really satisfied with it. It had one of the most unique sex scenes I've ever read, and I applaud the author for using circus talents in that. But I had a really good time reading this one, and it's a really good wrap up to the whole series. It wasn't where I had an issue with book 2, where the sex scenes seemed to overwhelm the storyline and there wasn't enough development between the characters, but in this one I felt like it was better paced, and the storyline really flowed quite well. So yeah, I was really happy with this, and I gave it 4.5 stars. The Undermining of Twyla and Frank by Megan Bannon is probably one of the strangest fantasy books I've ever read. And I mean that in a really good way, because I've read the first book in this world, so I kind of knew what I was coming into. The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy was set in a world where you have like an actual living place, and then you have this fantasy element world that they protect called 𝓤𝓽𝓮, and it's also exists still in this book here, and it will be in the next book in the series. And the two main characters in The Undermining of Twyla and Frank work as sort of marshals for 𝓤𝓽𝓮. They go in there and they protect, they patrol, and then they come home and they live their normal lives. They are also next door neighbours, and the best thing about this world is that it is mature characters. So both Twyla and Frank are in their early 50s. Twyla still has quite a good connection with her family. Her husband unfortunately died a few years ago, but she feels quite a lot of freedom from that point, because she felt like she was living for her family, and now she's got this role of her own as being a marshal in the 𝓤𝓽𝓮 force. And then you've got Frank, who unfortunately had a divorce, and his family have moved away, and he sees them sporadically, but they've always been next door neighbours. He was the one that got her the job as a marshal, and they work as a team all the time. And it's very clear from the beginning that Frank is in love with Twyla, and this story is solely told from Twyla's point of view. And because Twyla has like a slow process of thinking things through, this book is a little bit slower in pacing, but I actually enjoyed that, because we got to develop along with her, we got to understand things, and sure, we had insight as readers to tell the difference between how she was feeling and how the world around her was reacting. But I really enjoyed this one. You do have to come in with a bit of an open mind. Like I mentioned, this is a bit of a weird world. 𝓤𝓽𝓮 is pretty much a fever dream. The world makes no sense, but it's absolutely fun. And like in this one, we have glitter pooping pink dragons, and a baby dragon attaches itself to Frank. So yeah, there's a lot happening. We also have the return of a character from book 1 who I absolutely adored, and he's in this as well, and he rounds out the the group as a good trio. They have this really great bond. You can bounce back and forth ideas. It's humorous. It's, you know, emotional at times. There's a real commitment to each other. And I just felt like this gives you a warm hug. I read this when I was incredibly sick, and it was the perfect escape that I needed from reality. I wasn't thinking about how ill I was. I was just thinking about, why are there pooping dragons that have glitter in it? Like, what is going on here? It was just a really good time and a really good romance, and I highly recommend this one. I gave it 5 stars. As you can see, I had a lot of e-arcs to read over June, and this is another one. This is Deceiving the Cursed Beast by Jen Linning. This is book 1 in the Once Upon a Enchantment series. It is a retelling fairy tale world, and this first book follows Beauty and the Beast. I really enjoyed this one for some elements, and then I struggled with another. I'll tell you that in a minute. But the things I really enjoyed was that Felix, who is the main male protagonist, he gets turned into the most amazing beast. I just had such a good time with the fact that he was not conventionally a beast, but it worked really well for the storyline. I had a great time with that portion of it. And Isabel, or Izza as she's called throughout the book, is unfortunately put into the position by her father to fulfill the role of breaking Felix's curse. She is bound by a contract that she didn't even sign, and so she has to go to his castle, because he is the Duke of Truthhold, and figure out how to break his curse so she can break her own contract. And they work really well together. There's great banter between Felix and Izza. The development of their characters together is quite nice. The romance is very slow, and their connection is believable. They really do want to work together to, you know, fix the curse, but also there's a level of companionship that neither of them have had before with each other. It's really easy to spend time with each other. And I really liked this in the backdrop of an enchanted castle as well. It was just really good fun and really wholesome for most of the book. However, there is also the element of the magic system, and that is where this failed the most. I felt like the author tried too hard with the magic system. She made it too intense with information, too repetitive with passing over that information, and too complex at times. And I often sat there going, what is this scene helping to develop the story along? And there was no progression. It felt quite stagnant at times, and you just had to listen to all this magic talk that didn't really feel like it related to what was happening. It all adds up in the end, but it just felt really dry, and I didn't enjoy that as much. However, I found as I read on, I really came to enjoy the main characters and pass that up. And then obviously the romance hit at the end, and I had a good time with it before the physical aspect came in. I found that their connection was really believable. However, I do not like when smut happens in the last 5% of a book. I feel like it's not needed at that point if it hasn't happened already, and I felt like that was just accommodating to the first readers of the book. But overall, had a good time, and I recommend this to people who enjoy Beauty and the Beast retellings. The next book I completed was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is a book I've already read before. It's my favourite romance novel, actually, and I decided to listen to it as an audiobook over the month of June because it was my birthday month, and I really had a good time listening to this. I gave it 5 stars again. It just reiterated how much I enjoy Nora as a character, how relatable she feels to me as the oldest sister. I'm also an older sister, and how she tackles the world. Very similar mindsets at times, so I felt really rewarded to rediscover her again and fall back into her way of thinking and you know, just the way that this whole storyline develops. Obviously, I absolutely love Charlie Lastra. He is top tier for me. Still love this man so, so much. And yeah, just reading this again was very much so like a warm hug. I had a really good time. I consumed it all in one session. And yeah, I will never stop raving about how much I love this book and recommend it to everyone. The next arc that I had to complete was The Next Best Fling by Gabriela Garmes. I'm probably saying that wrong. I'm so sorry. This is book one in Librarians in Love, and this is a debut romance novel. I gave this 3.5 stars. There are things that I enjoyed about it and things that I didn't enjoy about it. Seems to be the theme of every video like this. But this follows Marcella. She is in love with her best friend. She's loved him, I think, for 10 years now, and he's getting married. And obviously this is quite crushing for her. And how does she deal with these feelings? Well, at the reception for the engagement party, his brother turns up and is very drunk, and she discovers that he is in love with the woman his brother is marrying, who is also his best friend. And they end up in sort of like a fake dating relationship because they just cover for each other. She takes him home to her house to recover from the whole incident and not let out his feelings, and she helps him just, you know, he sleeps on her couch kind of thing. And everyone assumes that they went home and slept together, and they never correct this. And then over a course of time, obviously they start to have a romantic relationship instead, and they sort of fall into it and keep it going. I found this book to be incredibly messy, and if you enjoy like lots of complex family dynamics and like really messy storylines and drama that way, then you're going to enjoy this book. I really struggled with Marcella's crush on Ben, the brother, sorry, on her best friend, and it felt really like gross. I was really uncomfortable with it. He is completely toxic, and he has conditioned her into believing that she needs him. And I really enjoyed the way that the author gave Marcella the growth that she needed to overcome being this woman in Ben's life, and expressed really well with the anger and the hurt and the loss she felt from losing this friendship. Equally, though, I found it all really messy with the fact that Theo, who's the main male protagonist, was also in love with his best friend slash the woman that Ben was to marry, and they had this really toxic brotherly relationship. And I just feel like a lot happened in this book that was quite yeah, messy is the word I'm going to use. That being said, this is a debut novel. I could really see where this author is going to flourish in the future. Most of the issues were down to pacing for me and just throwing like excess drama at the characters, especially the self-sabotage plotline. Didn't really enjoy that one for Marcella because she is a curvy girl and she's already been through enough. I figured that that really didn't need to happen. And yeah, the angst was just a little bit on the forefront for me. I didn't really enjoy it as much as I was hoping when I read the synopsis, but I really do think that this author is going to come into her strength once she's got a few more books under her catalogue list. And I do recommend checking this out if you enjoy the stuff that I've mentioned, the messiness and the family dynamics. I know some people really enjoy that in a romance novel. Also, the smut was good and well written. Sometimes I thought the pacing was a little bit weird, but overall, it's a nice romance, and I recommend it to people who enjoy this type of read. The next book I completed was Past, Present, Future by Rachel Lynn Solomon. This is book two in the Rowan and Neil series, so Today, Tonight, Tomorrow was book one, and this is a YA romance. I enjoyed this one more than the first book in the series. I really enjoyed the development of Rowan and Neil separately as well as a couple. So both Rowan and Neil have a fast, intense drop into their relationship in book one. They were enemies as much as you could call them as such. They were definitely academic rivals, and obviously they overcame that and realised they had a romantic connection. They spent the summer together, and then this book follows them when they're in separate places for college. And one is in New York, and the other is in, I think, Boston. And obviously they've both travelled all the way from Seattle to be at these dream universities doing their dream um, academic choices, and obviously they both have their own issues to get through and resolve, and I just really enjoyed the development of this. I liked watching Rowan struggle with her writing and her belief, because she was so um, not, I don't want to say conceited or full of herself, but she knew what she wanted to be. She was quite ambitious. She knew what everything was going to look like for herself, and then to obviously have this all upended and have to navigate that was really interesting to read, and rewarding to see her grow as a person and accept that things can't always be so static and so like planned out. And then on the other side, we have Neil, who's really struggling in this book. He discovers a lot more about himself in a good and a bad way. There is mental health representation in here that I think is done really well. And he really has to face some demons that he's had in his life from the trauma around his dad. And this does lead to some angst between the pair. They are in a committed relationship with each other, but obviously they're quite young, they're in college, there's going to be tension involved there. I was really thankful that the author chose to not use cheating or like having a one night kiss or something, or feeling like emotional cheating was happening between the two, because I've read that happen quite a lot in YA romance, and I'm just not about that. But in this one, it didn't happen. I was really impressed with the way that Solomon was able to deliver on the angst side of things, and the way that these two are so in love but needed to have time apart. I felt like that was really well done, and the ending was really perfect. I just had a good time, and I'm thankful that the author decided to return to this world, because I did give book one 3.5 stars, and I didn't enjoy it nearly enough as I did this one, and I recommend reading both books now to everyone. We're on to the second to last book now. This is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. Gillig. This is book one in the Shepherd King series. It is a fantasy, a gothic romance fantasy type of thing. And I absolutely love this. It was my favourite read of the month. The main reason why it took me so long to read this, because obviously my dates were between May and June, was I started it, I think I read like 25% of it in May, and then had lots of arcs to read and had to put it on the back burner. And I also chose intentionally to read this as a mixed read, so I wanted to read the physical copy and mark down all the quotes and stuff and annotate my book alongside listening to the audiobook. And so every time I go and have some time free, it wouldn't be time that I could use to do both things. So I kept holding off. And then on the 27th of June, I completed the rest. I consumed it all in one sitting. What was remaining, had an amazing time. This book is phenomenal. So this follows Elspeth, and she has, since a young age, I think like 10 or 11, she has been afflicted by magic, and people having magic is not seen as a good thing in this world, and they see it like a disease, and most people get killed. So she's been hidden this whole time away from society with this affliction. And she also has, because of what her affliction is, met what they have in this world are like cards, like a Providence card deck, and it's kind of like Caraval but really dark, where there's like all these cards with like different like ways of being, and there's a nightmare card, and this isn't giving away the storyline. She has met the nightmare card and has since got a nightmare inside of her. She was able to absorb him, I guess. So she's been living with another voice inside of her since she was like 10 or 11. And Nightmare and Elspeth work really well together. I love this so much, where an entity is inside of the main character. If you've read 𝓬𝓲𝓬, it's kind of like that. I absolutely love 𝓬𝓲𝓬, and so when I noticed that Nightmare was a lot like Revenant, I was living, having such a good time. Nightmare is incredibly morally grey. In fact, I feel like most of the characters in this world are, but he is just really interesting to have. His insight is really fun, and quite twisted. He does a lot of riddles, and Elspeth doesn't really pay enough attention to what he's saying to her at times, and it really gets you thinking. Elspeth is just trying to live, really, and she ends up having to do somewhat of a fake engagement or fake romance with the main male character, Raven, I think it is. And he is part of like the King's Guard, but there's also like a whole betrayal underlining plot line there. I don't want to give too much away. I'm aware that this is a story that's quite complex, and I'm trying to explain that you need to read this book without trying to give anything away. It is so good. If you love books like Belladonna, Starling House, A Study in Drowning, that really like dark gothic type of vibe, especially Belladonna. I highly recommend this. I had such a good time. One of my favourite reads of the year. In fact, it was so difficult for me to choose between One Dark Window and The Familiar as my top read for the first 6 months of the year that I had to do like a random generator game and let it choose for me, because I just cannot choose between them. They're just both that good. And I cannot wait to pick up book 2 in this duology, but I'm kind of sad that it will be over once I pick it up, so I've been kind of holding off since. The last book I read in June was Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail Bail by Ashley Herring Blake. This is book 2 in the Bright Fools series. This is a sapphic romance, and it follows Astrid, who we meet in the first book as a side character. She is a very rigid type of person. She's had to live a certain way. Her mother has really curated the way that she thinks that Astrid should live, and this book is about Astrid actually failing from that lifestyle and choosing the one that actually suits her. It also is framed around a TV show where she is the design what is the word? She created the design for the new layout of a dilapidated hotel, historic type of hotel. And then obviously Jordan, who is the other main female protagonist, she is here as a carpenter. She's here to help bring it back together, and also her family owns the hotel, so it means a lot to her that this goes well. They obviously have a lot of banter back and forth, but the thing I really enjoyed about this book the most was how Astrid was able to come out of who she was, and that Jordan supported that. And there was a really key element to the friendship that's built first, and then obviously the romantic relationship that comes afterwards, that allows Astrid to be just Astrid, the person that she's always wanted to be but never been allowed to be. And it was really rewarding to read that, and that's the main reason why I gave this 4.5 stars. I also found the relationship between Jordan and Astrid felt more realistic this time round, and I liked the obstacles that Astrid had to go through, and Jordan recovering from the loss of her last relationship and finding love again was really pretty as well. I really enjoyed this. I wasn't actually going to continue this series, but I'm glad that the audiobook was on special and I was able to pick it up from Audible, so I'm really glad that I've read Bright Fools number 2, and I'm going to read the third book in this world as well. Hopefully I've been able to cut down some of the footage in this video, because right now where I'm seeing the numbers sitting at, it does make it a little bit of a longer video, especially since I've only had 12 reads to talk about, but I guess I've been quite chatty. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Are any of these books on your TBR, or have you read them? I'd love to know your thoughts below, especially if they don't match mine. I'd love to have a discussion about that. And until we next meet, I hope you have fun reading or journaling, and I'll see you in my next video very soon. Bye everyone!